So Nick and I are two of the three creative directors at Olivier Mythodrama, and our job is to invent new programs and to reimagine old programs. And Nick came to me in January and said, I've been thinking about the Tempest. And he had some amazing ideas that were taking us right back into the alchemy of the play. The play has an alchemical structure in it. It is literally a magical story dealing with magic. And we noticed that magic is the same root as the word imagination. Magi is the root of the word image, the root of the word magic, and the root of the word imagination. So this imagination has magic in it, is the idea. And that as human beings, we are, as far as we know, uniquely qualified to be magicians because of our access to the imagination. William Blake once said, nature is imagination. Everything that exists on this planet, arguably in the universe, but certainly on this planet, including us, started as an image, and something grew in to fill that image. So this is the root. It's not just about being creative. Imagination is the source of evolution. It's the source of all evolution. Something imagines itself as different than it was and figures out the right way to grow into it. So we believe that this is an interesting frame, both for personal and systemic transformation. Because you're not one system living and working together, we made the decision early on this week that we would work on the personal side of the transformational experience with you, knowing that as seasoned professionals, you would be able to translate as much as felt useful into your professional practice along the way. But our intention is to really work on who's in the room. And to see what magic this play might work on you. It isn't going to be a neatly wrapped up and integrated session. Mythodrama, the form, is a stimulus, so it's not over when it's over, if that makes sense. It is about the seeds that you carry away with you, and some bits won't make sense. They might land in a few days or a few weeks, and other seeds will just blow away. They won't be yours. But we do invite you to think about, of all the things we talk about, and invite you to talk about and do through this session, what would be the one conversation that would be yours to follow up with, and just see where that goes and trust it. There are windows of opportunity in our life, and to be able to read the signs, instead of putting off that nagging voice that says something rotten like, you must change your life. Those kind of voices. To keep putting them off. When is the window of opportunity? Are you ripe for change? When is change ripe for you? So, and the compelling story, to have a narrative. Human beings live by story. Almost by definition, if we're in a transition, we have realized, or the world is showing us, that the old story that we have about ourselves isn't working anymore. And almost by definition, we haven't yet figured out what the new story is. So the island is a time when we are in between stories, and it can be terrifying for exactly that reason. The power of symbolic action in personal and organizational life is huge. The little rituals that we can do, the marking moments, the rites of passage, the ceremonies that we can meaningfully create that mark moments in transition. What's interesting about Shakespeare, the mask is like absolute cutting-edge theatre technology in 1606 when he wrote the play. It was just being invented, like kind of 4D TV or something, or some of those places we were looking at yesterday. The newest of the new. And the clue here for us is use the new to bless the new. So that in itself is part of the symbolic action. We're living our life in between two sleeps. We've woken up from one, we haven't yet entered the other. What dreams are ours to bring alive in that gap? That seems to be the real provocative question. What is ours to dream and to make? Because we are such stuff as dreams are made of. The change in the change leaders, or even the transformational change educators. What needs to change in us to be really fit for purpose for these 21st century challenges that no leader alive has ever faced before in the history of humankind? You know, we can't keep on doing the same thing. We're going to keep getting the same results. So what is ours to do with this? What do we need to look at in order to transform, transcend, improve, collaborate, whatever it is? What needs to change in us to be the change leaders for others in the future? The real sign of a successful transformation, personal, for sure, organizational, ideally, is that people find more of themselves in it. They can bring more of themselves to work at the end of it, not less, not the same, more. That we've enhanced and released potential in the system and in our own personal system.
Very briefly, just to get a sense of where you are on the kind of spectrum of how you see the projects you're involved in. One of the ways of looking at it is to say that, you know, at one end of the scale there is the capacity to see the possibilities of the future. I see what's possible. We often talk about, you know, the capacity that we have for imagining how things will be while managing how things are. And part of our role in any of the work that we do is to find out where we sit between the spaces of what we might call reality and possibility. And reality says this is the way the world is. This is how it is. This is the fact. This is the data. And the possibilities are what we imagine things could be like in an as yet uncreated future. And what we see in the play, which is extraordinary, is what happens when you fall out either side of that. So too much possibility becomes this kind of idealistic, fantastical thinking that we see in Gonzalo, irrelevant idealism. It's up here. It's never grounded. And at the other end, too much reality can make us cynical. We see that in Saint Sebastian, we see that in Antonio. And I would suggest that when you look at where you are in that the points of cynicism and irrelevant idealism, they take us, as it were, out of the game. The projects that we're engaged in, we cannot connect with if we're in either of those places. So all of us in this room have some relationship in the space between reality and possibility, and part of the reflective process, we don't have time for it today, but part of the reflective process that we might want to look at is where do we sit on that spectrum? How do I hold the reality of what is whilst living into the possibility of what could be without it going beyond into some kind of irrelevance or into a cynicism which will pull us down and take us out of the game. So that's a kind of way of framing that little piece. Does that make a little bit of sense? And again, it's worth us spending time looking, and that can go out to an organization, a team, whatever it is, but we all sit somewhere on that line. And of course, if the answer is, well, where am I? I don't know, then that I don't know-ness is how we show up. So there's something about making that unconscious place more conscious again. So, and I think that's what we can see in this, particularly in this period where we see these mainland reactions. So.
We, all of us, have conditions under which we will thrive better than others. And if you haven't yet had the opportunity to notice what those conditions are, please do. I know two conditions that allow me to thrive are working with wisdom stories and developing people. Now there are times when I'm working with a wisdom story, but really the people I'm working with want entertainment, not to be developed. It doesn't do it for me. Can't do it anymore. Get into performance mode for the sake of it. I could 15 years ago, can't do it anymore. There are times when I'm developing people, but there's no story, it's just very process-driven, and I can do it, but I don't love it. But put those two things in a room, I am more likely to show up with positive energy than if only one of them, and a lot more likely than if neither of them are in the room. So knowing your personal conditions of thriving in work would be the other invitation for this piece. Of course, the voices of reality, skepticism, cynicism, all the rest of it can pull us back from the dreams. And the dreams sometimes can get a bit inflated and delusional or feel-good factor. For me, both are important. How to have your head in the clouds and your feet on the ground. And that's the bridge, and holding that, in Shakespeare, he has Hamlet say, we are creatures crawling between heaven and earth. That's our bridge. But this imaginative capacity to think about things that do not exist is literally unbelievable. It is magic. Everything that exists on this planet was imagined once, was a seed in someone or something or some object in nature's imagination. The evolutionary process, as far as we know at the moment, started with a big bang. Energy, light, heat, matter, life, consciousness, self-conscious awareness, something like that, a few billion years. As far as we know, we're it. Right? There may be aliens out there. A lot of people believe there are. A couple of my best friends do. One of our best friends do. But, no, not him. But as far as we know, we are the actual culmination of whatever you want to call it, but for want of better words, I'm going to call it the creative impulse in the universe. So the bigger picture is one that is consciously evolving, and who knows where it will be. But in terms of the creative impulse, I have no idea personally how much intentionality there is in this, but there seems to be a process that is trying to discover itself through us, through life in the universe in some way. And we can have 100 different names from it. But that impulse, that evolutionary impulse, is coded in us. We have the potential to imagine something and make it real. So there are big pictures out there, and whatever part we play in it, that is our part to play. And helping one person next to us and helping a huge system change its carbon footprint is another way of doing it. Finding our way of serving that big picture, but not being deflated. Don't allow the big dreams to be deflated because the world isn't ready for them. That's Gaudi, that's Westminster Abbey, that was the Globe Theatre. It is something that we are seeding that future generations can get the fruits of. That also stops it being too egotistical. It's not bad. If we get to plant the flag in the promised land and everyone applauds us, there's a bit of ego in that. But if we're really willing to plant those seeds for the next generation, there's something perhaps a bit more soulful in that.